Hi Diana. Today we're actually going to look at swapping out elements of the layout of the page. In this case, one of the ones that you were asking about was, say, if you wanted to get rid of this Facebook feed on the right hand side, or maybe change some of the logos underneath it. Now, I'm not going to go into a ton of detail here because I want to keep it fairly short. This is a pretty deep topic because it really involves editing the template. But once you kind of get into the swing of things and you understand how it all links together, it's actually pretty easy to do. So I'm using this one as an example because it's already kind of set up. So what if I wanted to swap out some of the elements on this page? In this case, we're talking specifically about the elements underneath the header section. Which is everything with the menu and above. Now, the way that this is set up is sort of unique, but you'll see it once I start looking at it. The first thing I'm actually going to do is click on Edit Page, so we can see what template it's actually using in the context of our site. Just be a second here, and we see on the right-hand side that the template layout is individual pages. Well, what does that mean? It actually is going to tell us the format of the page itself. And by that I mean instead of having to kind of design the layout of each page, on a website, most of them are fairly standard. You have certain content on the left-hand side and certain content on the right-hand side. You have certain content in the header and certain content in the footer. Sometimes the content on sort of the main area changes from page to page, but for the most part, a lot of that is standard. You want that menu to stay there. You want that footer information to stay there. In a lot of cases, you even want that sidebar content to stay there. So in our case, we have the individual pages layout. If I click up here, we can see there's actually a few different layouts to choose from. Right now there's one called full width. That would be a layout that has the full width instead of the sidebar. It removes the sidebar entirely, lets the content take up the full width of the page. But the question here is, where can that be accessed to change, and how do you actually go about changing it? So if I go back to on the left hand side, if we look at where it says Greening Sacred Spaces Revamp, if I hover over that and go to Templates, we can actually start to see how this all kind of fits together. Specifically, all we have here as a template is Greening Sacred Spaces Revamp. And if I click on that, it'll actually give us the layouts that we were just looking at. See, so we have individual pages, blog, front page, full width, our team. These are just some of the ones that I've sort of been working with at this point. There doesn't tend to be a lot of layouts, again, because most pages are laid out fairly consistently. Now, in the structure of this plugin that's used to create the template, there's a full layout, which is all the sort of the main content that exists in the middle of the page, and then there are partial layouts, and all they are the footer and header. What that allows us to do is we could swap out a different header or swap out a different footer, even keeping the same sort of layout, because we can always copy these, make kind of variations on them instead. So just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, let's take a look at the front page layout briefly. Now, if we look at the front page of the site, and I'll pop that open at the same time. So this is what the front page of the site looks like currently. There's actually quite a bit of content that's separate, that's different from the rest of the pages on the site. So if we look at this front page layout, it actually reflects what we see on the front page of the site, though at first it might not seem that way. In our case, this content that we're looking at only represents this area right here. So if I look up, it says Ultimatum Recent Post and Text. If I open that up, it says blog. If I open this one up, it says services. And if I open this one up, well, we can't really see it here because the rest of them are open, but if I close that one, we can see it's member map, and that's just representing this content here. For the front page, it's always going to be a little more complicated. In the design of this site, most of the content, in terms of this sort of content, like the actual text that's used on the page and the sidebar, I've actually placed in the footer. So this and this piece at the bottom are all kind of fit together as one content piece because of the way that it kind of slides into it. They kind of connect. The bottom piece actually kind of overlays into it. So I'll show you exactly what I mean by that. I'll just go back to the layout screen. And if I go to front page footer, we can see that all of the elements that are here are reflected right here. So the first thing it starts with is text. Now, of course, this is all HTML code, but I'll show you how we can kind of interpret that fairly easily as well. So what it's saying here is that what we're looking at are two logos. That's these two logos right here, the Facebook and Twitter logo. So all it is a little bit of code that tells what images to put there and the links that they link to in this case. Underneath that is what's called our blog role, or in our case, this is an include page. All it's saying is that when you put content in one of the pages, it's going to take that content and place that here. That means that if you ever go in to the list of pages and start editing this content, it would just update on this page automatically. On the right hand side, we have text that says latest posts, and this is the iframe code that comes from Facebook's site that lets us display what the Facebook feed is. Underneath that, if I close this, we have text that represents this text over here for the address and also the image for the Trillium Foundation. We can see if we actually slide down a little bit that we can see that. This right here is the Trillium logo. Now this, of course, is all in HTML code, and that can be kind of the most confusing aspect of this. However, there is actually kind of a shortcut, an easier way to deal with this. I mean, ideally, this would be able to just open up and allow us to use a visual editor to make these changes ourselves, but unfortunately, most widgets don't really allow for that. Now, some of them are kind of simplistic, and you can put in things like custom menus, just using these widgets that are available on the right hand side, and there's lots of those that are available, but here a lot of times we're kind of stuck with using the code. However, if I go to posts and I open up posts and say I add a new one, and I'm just using this sort of as an area, a kind of a rough area to play with. So if I go to the post page, and again I have both the text and visual view of this, if I was to copy this text into the text version, I can then switch to visual and get a sense of what that looks like. Then I could always make a change here, copy this code, and then paste it back in here to kind of represent those changes. Now I know that's not the easiest way that you would want this to happen, but generally when it comes to, because these kind of larger formatting things are things that tend to stick, things that tend to be, once you make those changes, they stay there for a long time, this is usually the best way to do it. But let's speak kind of specifically to the page that we were looking at earlier. So if we go back to the Halton Peel chapter page, say we wanted to, let's just say we wanted to remove the Facebook feed in this case. As we said before, we go to edit page, so we see exactly what kind of layout it's using. So up in the top right, we see individual pages. So I'm just going to go back to the layout screen and look at individual pages. And we see that it uses the default header and the default footer. And in fact, it doesn't actually have any content outside of that. The reason being is that we've put all the content, just to make it consistent across all pages, in the footer. So say that in this case we wanted to use a different layout for the page. I'm just going to go back to the layout screen, and I'm actually going to clone this layout, and that's going to create an exact copy of what we have there already. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give this a name, just something we can use temporarily. Let's call it member pages, because it's going to have a slightly different structure to it. We're going to switch the footer out to something slightly different. So I save that, and I go back to the layout screen. And right now we know it uses the default footer. If I go into default footer, just like I did before, or actually we looked at front page footer, but it's the same sort of thing. We have the text on the right hand side, which says latest post, and underneath that it has the code for the Facebook feed. And then we have the information underneath that with the address and the Trillium logo. And on the left-hand side, all we have is the default loop. Now, we could just make the changes right here in this default footer, but of course, that would change it for every site that uses the default footer. So instead, I'm just going to make a copy of that. So I'm just going to go to default footer and make clone. And then what it's going to do is create a default footer copy. But what I'm going to do is go into this default footer copy and title it something that would be recognizable in this case. So if I called it something like member footer, that would be fine. So now, once I save that, I actually have the ability to go in and start to make changes to it. So in this case, just to show something very quickly, since I don't want to take up too much of your time, say I just wanted to remove the Facebook feed entirely. Right now it uses this iframe. This comes right from the Facebook site, but there are also Facebook widgets that could be installed that are used. This is just the one that I liked the most because it's the one that we know Facebook is going to stick with. So I'm just going to remove that text entirely and save it. So all that's doing now, we'll still have this title that says latest posts, but it won't have that Facebook feed anymore. So then I save the layout, and I go back to the layout screen. So now what I want to do is link that footer to the individual page that we created. I must have forgot to save it before, but this is the one that we made the copy of. Just call it member pages. Save that layout. Because right now it uses a default footer. But I'm actually going to remove that by clicking this little trash bin icon. And we see on the right-hand side we have member footer right here. I'm going to take that and drag that. I dragged it to the body instead, but I'm just going to drag that to the footer location. So now it uses the default header and the member footer. I'm going to save that as a layout. So now we have member pages, which has a default header, and the member footer, which has no Facebook feed on the right-hand side. So now I'm going to go back to the layout screen. And we should be able to see member pages under the list, and we do. It's right here. So now the only thing that we have to do is going back to the edit page for the Halton Peel chapter. So this is like if I wanted to go to the Halton Peel chapter page and click on edit, or click on, what does it say at the top? Let me pop it open so we'll know exactly how we would get to here. So say I was going to the Halton Peel chapter page, and I clicked on Edit Page at the top of the screen. Because right now it's still using the same layout. I, up here in the top right, can select a layout, and I'm going to choose Member Pages, because that's the one we just created, and click on Update. And once that's saved and I go to the page, we can see that it no longer has the Facebook feed on the right-hand side. It reflects the changes that we just made. Now what that means is that if we had a format that would be good for multiple pages, we could set them all to be member pages that exact same way. Or we could set up a separate page layout for dozens of different pages. We could have one that was completely different, so we could remove, we could make it full width, or we could move the sidebar to the left-hand side. It gives us a lot of flexibility regarding that layout. Now I know at first this is going to seem particularly complicated. There's a lot of elements at play here that normally I would work into kind of an advanced training session. But I think you should feel free to go in and start making these changes yourself and see what kind of comfort level you have with it before we do that training session, because it would really give you a leg up on it. Now I do apologize. I know this is sort of rushed. It might seem a little bit confusing, but if you have any questions, just let me know, and hopefully this will at least get you to that kind of initial piece of it and get you editing this content without too much trouble.